really on some we not our ancestors type of time. Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode. So if you're ready, let's go. All right, y'all, so back at it with the press-ons from BT Art Box. Boom, boom, boom. I'm feeling good about this set. I think they're gonna last me for a while. But the next time I do it, I think I'm gonna artsy it up a little bit, put my own little spin on it, do a couple little designs or whatever on it, because they cute. They real cute for what they are, but I feel like I could, you know, make them better. So yeah, I might do that because I love the French. I love the French, and y'all know it take me forever and a damn day to do a French. So to have this already here would be perfect for me. And yeah, we're gonna see what I can come up with. Anyhow, I really don't got too much to say aside from the fact that it was my birthday yesterday, and your girl had, well, I didn't really do nothing. I didn't do nothing at all, actually. But I had a good time because I didn't do anything. I didn't go to work. I'm not going to work tomorrow. And then I'm off for the next 2 days. So I got myself a little mini vacation. And yeah. And if you know me, that don't sound like a big deal. But I'm one of those ones who just be going to work on their birthday because sometimes for me, it just be feeling like just another day. And so I'm proud of myself for taking that initiative and taking that step to actually do something for myself and take off. And my friend took me to the Sugar Factory on Saturday. So this is what I looked like. And Jason, he bought me a new laptop. So we back to editing on a laptop now. We don't have to struggle it out with a phone no more. And yeah. I had a really good birthday. So yeah, hey 36, what it's looking like, what's she looking like, is she looking good? I think so. Anyway, with all that being said, we're gonna go ahead and hop right into today's case. Well, not right in because I just talked for like 10 minutes, but we're gonna hop into today's case. And if you've been here for a little minute now, then you already know that we're going from the deserts to the snow-capped mountains of America in alphabetical order. So from Alabama to Wyoming, and today we are in North Dakota. So it's July 6, 2012, and two men who had just met a couple of days prior are riding down Highway 94 in Burleigh County, North Dakota. And real quick, the amount of times that I've wanted to call this place Burleigh County is unreal. If you from where I'm from, then you know that this say Burleigh. And so while I was researching this case, I kept calling this place Burleigh County. And then when I heard somebody say it, they said Burleigh. And I was like, damn, that's probably why they be pronouncing it wrong when they in my city, because around the world, apparently they call it Burleigh. Anyhow, they are riding down I-94 in Burleigh County, right outside of Bismarck, North Dakota. And while they are driving, a highway patrol officer notices that the van is swerving. It is going all over the road. And before you know it, the van crashes into those sand barrels that be on the highway, that be on the side of the highway, those yellow sand barrels with the red top. No, it's not red, the black top. Yeah, the van crashed into those and ended up in a ditch. So the highway patrol officer rushes over to the crash site. And when he gets there, the driver of the van is already outside of the vehicle screaming for help. And he see that the driver does have some injuries on him, but they don't seem like life-threatening injuries. They just minor injuries from the crash. And so he quickly gives him a look over and is like, okay, we can call the ambulance to get you to the hospital and checked out. But then he looks inside the van and then he sees that the passenger did not have the same fate as the driver. The highway patrol officer sees that the passenger is suffering from severe injuries. And so he immediately goes into first responder mode and he tries to find a pulse for this passenger. Unfortunately, there wasn't one. So like I said, the ambulance had already been called to take the driver to the hospital. And now the coroner was also called to remove the body from the van. And while they're waiting on the coroner to come and pick up the body, the highway patrol officer peeped that the injuries on this passenger don't look like they came from no car crash, especially the type of car crash that this was, because it wasn't like a major car crash. This was a single vehicle car crash into the sand barrels. That was it. Like, yes, it was bad because it was an accident, but it would not have caused the type of injuries that he sees on this passenger. This man had bruises on his wrist. It looked like his neck had been sliced, if you will, and there were apparent stab wounds in his chest. And so the highway patrol officer was like, oh, hell no. And so he decided to call the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation to the scene, as well as the state's prosecutor, because something else is going on here. And he didn't know what. He felt like he knew what, but he didn't really know what. And so he needed their expertise and them to come out to the scene, because this was going to be something more than a crash. And this was confirmed once they started searching the van and its surrounding area, because outside of the van, they found a hatchet, zip ties, duct tape, and a knife sheath. And then on the inside of the van, they found the knife that was supposed to be in the sheath, and it was bloody. So based off of this, they determined that this was more than likely going to be a kidnapping homicide. And so they sent an agent to the hospital ASAP for two reasons. One, to question the driver, and then two, to make sure that once this driver was released, he was released into police custody and not set free and sent home. Now, while they feel like it's obviously clear what happened, it's not necessarily clear what happened in this van. So they're not able to throw murder charges at this driver at this particular moment. But what they can do is charge him with reckless driving. And so that's what they do in order to maintain custody of him once he's released. So the agent is there at the hospital with his driver, and he pretty much asks him, okay, so what happened today? And the driver of this van told the agent that him and his passenger were just riding down I-94 when the van hit a curb. And once the van hit the curb, the wheels started shaking and the van just started going crazy. And he tried to stop it, but he couldn't. And they ended up crashing into those sand barrels, and that's what happened. Now, before we continue on with the investigation, let me tell you a little bit about the passenger of this van, the victim. His name is Lee Burt Edward Clay, and he was born in East Point, Georgia on January 12th, 1972 to his mom, Jean Gary, and his dad, Ken Clay. And Lee was described as a cool dude who loved spending time with his friends and family and enjoyed outside sports, more particularly motorsports. And in 2000, Lee met the love of his life, a woman named Rachel. And the two of them got together, and 2 years later, in 2002, they would have a baby girl together named Carissa. And in this relationship, everything was all good until 2005, when Lee ended up getting into a motorcycle accident. And the injuries that he sustained and his recovery process, it kind of left him as a shell of himself. He turned into a person who Rachel didn't necessarily recognize as the person who she fell in love with. And so the two of them decided to split. It was actually pretty amicable. Lee knew what he was going through, and he knew that he couldn't be the person that Rachel needed him to be. But they maintained a friendship though, and had a very good co-parenting relationship for Carissa. And then in 2012, this is when Lee had started kind of getting back to himself. He was the Lee that Rachel remembered prior to the accident. And the two of them decided to reconcile and get back together, and they started planning their future together. Carissa was going to be 10 that year, and they had stuff that they wanted to do. They wanted to buy a new house. They wanted to get married, potentially have more kids. They had all intentions on spending the rest of their lives together. And because they had planned on building this life together, Lee knew that he wanted to be the provider for his family. He wanted to be able to get that house for Rachel and Carissa. He wanted to be able to give Rachel the wedding that she wanted. And hell, he wanted to be able to support some more kids. And so in April of 2012, Lee took a job that would actually take him away from his family, but it would be paying well. And this job was a job working in the oil fields with a company called Labor Ready. And it was going to be a 3-month job that was based out of Bismarck, North Dakota. And so while it wasn't ideal for him to be away from his family, if this was going to bring in the big bucks, then this is what Lee was going to do. And so that's how he ended up in North Dakota in a van with this driver whose name is John Bridges Jr. So now back to the hospital with John. So after he's treated for his injuries and released, is straight to the police station for questioning. And remember, this is all still just for reckless driving charges only. However, the detectives do want to see if he will tell them anything that could lead to a murder charge. But he gives them nothing new. At the police station, he tells them the same thing that he told them at the hospital. And that was that he ran into a curve on a highway, the van started going crazy, he couldn't control it, and they crashed. Now, I'm not really 100% sure about all the roads in America, but I ain't never been on a highway that had a curve. But that's what he said. So that's what I'm gonna tell you. So the investigator let him talk and let him tell his story, which he truly believed was a lie. And at the end of the interview, the investigator told him like, the injuries that Lee sustained, they don't look like they came from no car accident, my boy. And John looked at the investigator and was like, you calling me a liar? And the investigator was like, nah, I'm not calling you no liar. I'm just telling you what I saw. And with that, the interview was over and John was taken to the county jail and booked on reckless driving charges. Now, while he was in jail, the investigators wanted to learn a little bit more about John. They wanted to learn a little bit more about his history because in that interview, they asked him, had he ever been in trouble before? And he said, yeah, but he didn't really want to go into details. So they wanted to know what the details were of him being in trouble. And so the investigators investigated and they found out that on April 16th, 1986, when John was just 16 years old, there was a group of kids in his neighborhood in Carrier Mills, Illinois. And this group of teenagers was really just minding their own black ass business when John decided to trot his ass out the house and just start spewing racial hate and threats at them. Now, this group consisted of Brad and Danny Taylor and Danny's girlfriend. And once John came out his house throwing around his racism, they was really on some we not our ancestors type of time. And Brad confronted John like, what's up? And I don't know what words was exchanged or what happened between Brad and John, but it ended with Brad slapping the taste out of John's mouth. And in response, John didn't draw his fists. He wasn't ready for a fair fight. He drew a gun and shot at the group. And once the shots rang out, Brad, Danny, and the girlfriend ran. And while John was aiming at Brad, he ended up shooting Danny in the leg. And so while Brad and the girlfriend are still running for their lives, Danny is now on the ground. And after he shot Danny, John went back into his home, reloaded his gun, came back outside, stood over Danny and called him a racial slur, which I'm just gonna guess had something to do with a hard ER, and shot him in the chest, killing him. Danny Taylor Jr. was described as a good athletic kid who was quiet. He was born on March 29th, 1968 to his parents Ethelina and Danny Taylor Sr. And from what I gathered, he was one of 6 kids, and he was only 18 years old at the time of his murder. So remember, John was only 16 when he killed Danny, but they decided to try him as an adult, and he pled not guilty on the grounds of self-defense. Now, in my personal opinion, I feel like maybe that first shot might have been self-defense because, I mean, at the end of the day, he was outnumbered and he did just get slapped. But the kill shot, though, going back in the house, reloading, coming back and calling this man a hard ER before essentially executing him. Yeah, no, I don't think that constituted as self-defense. Now, a lot of the community at the time, they felt like John had killed Danny based off of the color of his skin, which we would now classify as a hate crime. However, in 1986 in Illinois, that was not a thing. There was no such thing as a hate crime at that time, or it wasn't recognized by the justice system. And it wouldn't be recognized by the justice system in Illinois until 1991. So he couldn't be charged for a hate crime. It didn't exist. But anyways, John goes to trial. And at the conclusion of his trial, it was decided that Brad was actually the aggressor in the situation. And so John was acquitted of his murder charge on October 28th of 1986. However, he was convicted of the lesser charges, which were aggravated assault, attempted murder, and voluntary manslaughter. But because he wasn't convicted of the actual murder charge and he was only convicted of the lesser charges, they sentenced him as a juvenile, and they gave him the maximum sentence, which was 5 years. And just a couple of months after getting to juvie, he really showed them how much of a menace to society he really was when he attacked a corrections officer. And in this attack, he punched the correctional officer so hard that it fractured his jaw, leaving him with permanent nerve damage and sinus problems. And this was in November of 1986. So like I said, just a couple of months after he got there. Not even a couple of months, a month. Because he got sentenced in October. This is November. And he did end up going to trial for this. And even though he was convicted of 2 counts of aggravated battery, he didn't have to serve no additional jail time. And so, as scheduled, John Bridges Jr. was released after 5 years on his 21st birthday. So now, after the investigators found out all of this about John, they decided to bring him back in for questioning. So now at this point, it's been 2 days post-crash when they bring John back in for questioning. And they're ready to confront him with this new information that they have just learned about him. And be like, bro, we know you lying. But John had already had it in his mind that he was about to go in there and give it all up. And before they could even ask him a question or say anything, he was like, listen, I killed him. I'm going to tell you what happened. I just want to get this over with. Right? And so the investigators is like, oh, okay, bet. Tell us what happened. And he basically said that him and Lee had met a couple of days prior on a farming job. And it was one of those types where you work today, you gonna get paid today. And in my mind, that just solidified the fact that Lee was a hustler, because not only is he out here working in the oil fields, but while he's working in the oil fields, he's picking up side jobs. Because again, he is going to be the provider for his family by any means necessary. But anyways, John said that on July 6th, he ended up going to Walmart. And when he went to Walmart, he knew what he was going into Walmart for. And it was for the murder weapon, the knife. But he didn't want to seem suspicious. And so in addition to the knife, he picked up a Coca-Cola and a couple of snacks. Then after he picked up the knife at Walmart, he went over to Menards to get the zip ties and the duct tape, because he didn't want to buy everything. Like I said, he didn't want to be suspicious. He didn't want to buy everything at Walmart and they'd be like, girl, why you got duct tape, zip ties, and a knife? This looks awfully fucking suspicious. I mean, right. He didn't want to do that. And for those of y'all who don't know what Menards is like Home Depot Lowe's-esque. And after he left Menards, he texted Lee. And this is when Lee told him that he was currently at a Target, but he needed to go to Walmart. And John said that he had picked Lee up from this Target under the impression that he was going to take him to the Walmart, because every Friday, Lee would go to Walmart and send his check home to Rachel through Walmart's, through MoneyGram. So after he picked Lee up from the Target and they head into Walmart, the van starts to overheat while they're on the highway. So he pulled over to get the van situated. And while they pulled over, he asked Lee to go to the back of the van to get something so that he could fix it, like his tools or some coolant or whatever he needed. He asked Lee to go get it from the back of the van. And this is when he took the opportunity to pull the knife on Lee and force him into the van. And this is where he bound his arms, bound his wrists and his ankles with the zip ties. And while he had him bound at the wrists and ankles, he confronted Lee about recording him doing some shady shit. And Lee denied everything. He said he don't know what John is talking about. So John ended up grabbing Lee's phone, making him open it, and he checked through Lee's phone. And he didn't see any recordings of himself. So he realized in that moment that maybe he didn't do what I think he did he? And so John is pretty much telling Lee like, oh shit, my bad, G. I thought you was recording me doing some shady shit. Turns out you wasn't. And as much as I would like to let you go, I really don't think that I can let you go. So he hopped back in the driver's seat with Lee tied up in the back and he started driving. And at this point, he just driving to a place where he feel like he can murder Lee and leave him there and nobody will find him, basically. But while he's driving, John peep out his peripheral that Lee has somehow gotten out of his zip ties at the hands. And he now has a hatchet in his hand that was in the back of John's truck. So John is like, oh shit, he about to cut me. And this is when John lets go of the wheel, grabs the knife, and starts wrestling with Lee. And this is why the van was going all over the road, because nobody was controlling it. And once he was able to knock the hatchet out of Lee's hand, he started stabbing Lee, and that's when the crash happened. And once they crashed, John was able to grab the hatchet and basically hack at Lee's neck. He said pretty much in an effort to sever his spine and make sure that he was dead. But the highway patrol officer was rapidly approaching, so he did what he did and then hopped out of the car and then started screaming for help. And he actually said that it wasn't just supposed to be John. It was supposed to be John and another dude that he thought was recording him as well. But for whatever reason, he just couldn't get in contact with the other guy. And so the investigator was just listening to him tell this story. And he like, so why did you think Lee and this other dude was recording you doing some shady shit? And John was like, well, I had a dream. I had a dream that they was recording me doing some shady shit. The dream was vivid as fuck and I thought it was real. So then the investigator took it upon himself to ask John, had he ever killed before? And I don't know if it was to his surprise or not, but John said, well, yeah, I have, as a matter of fact. I killed 2 people in Oregon, 2 people in Washington, and I killed another person in either Wyoming or Utah, but I can't quite remember which state it was. And so the investigator was like, okay, well, damn, you gonna tell me about these. Tell me more about these. And John said out of his mouth, it don't matter. They were homeless. Excuse me? Just because somebody don't got a place to stay don't mean that they don't got nobody to care about them. The fuck? You was living out of your van. Do nobody not care about you? And if that's the case, I'm sorry for you, but that's not the case for every homeless person in America or in the world. Sometimes they just don't have the means to help their family members, or maybe their family members ain't ready for the help that they're ready to give. That pissed me off so bad when I heard that he said that it didn't matter because they was homeless. Just because you don't got nobody caring about your pale, white, ragged, racist ass, don't mean that other people don't. Anyway, because he didn't give any more information about the other murders that he allegedly committed, they were unable to be verified. And so they really don't know if John is a serial killer for real or not. But if in fact he did kill those other, 5 people, I do pray for those families. And I'm so sorry to them if they're still looking for them, because they don't have any answers. Their loved one is still missing and they'll never know who those people were that he allegedly killed. And so, yeah, if that's true, my heart goes out to those victims and their families as well, because they do matter despite whatever situation they was in. So after this confession, John is obviously now booked on murder charges, and he ends up pleading guilty to all charges on November 27, 2012. And with that guilty plea, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for the murder. And then he was sentenced to an additional 20 years for the kidnapping. Now, as much as I would love to be done with John's raggedy ass, we're not done just yet. Because a couple of months after he was sentenced and sent to prison, the justice system got a sudden case of deja vu. Because John attacked a correctional officer in there as well. But this time, he didn't attack him with his fist. He actually ended up stabbing the correctional officer this time. But luckily, though, the correctional officer did survive this stabbing, thus leaving John to be charged with attempted murder, as well as possession of a weapon by an inmate. And he was convicted of both of these and sentenced to an additional 40 years, which, I mean, I guess it really don't matter because he's serving out the rest of his days in jail anyways. But with this additional 40-year sentence, he was transferred to a supermax prison where he will serve the rest of his sentence, i.e. his life, in solitary confinement. So yay for that. But then he had the nerve to try to appeal his sentence. I don't know which sentence he was trying to appeal. I'm just gonna guess it was this 40-year solitary sentence, but it was denied. So fuck you, John. But that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know what you thought about today's case down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Let's zoom. All I wanna do is zoom. Hello, just thank you much. Woo, that took a lot of breath out of me. Damn. So it's July 6th, I was gonna say 19 something. So it's July 6, 2012, when two men who had just met a couple of days prior is riding down I-94 in Burleigh County, North Carolina. No. So they're not able to throw murder charges at this driver. He was born on March 26, 1968. No, 29. Then after he picked up and once he was able to as well as possession of a weapon.